Alright, to finish up the table setting, you want to make a flower and give the room a space. So first, to make the flower, we have two ways we can do it. We can go to poly modeling and grab a cylinder. Model that cylinder so that it's thick, just a little tiny. Make it thin, and then right-click vertex. From there, select one or three of the vertexes on the top, double-click your Move tool, and go to Soft Select. You want to adjust the fall-off so this area is red and that the black is at the bottom. And we can try to move that now. You get a petal shape. You can also make a petal by going to Curves and Surfaces, selecting the Bezier, put that back in object mode, and draw out your petal design. This will work especially well if you wanted something like a lily or anything that's going to be kind of a little more of an awkward shape. And then from there, once we're done that, because this is a curve, we can go to Curve and then Open, Close. Now I have that loop because I made my Bezier handle huge here. So I can right-click, go to Control Vertex, select that Bezier, and bring it down. And honestly, the better way to make this shape, see, be to give it some Bezier, but then bring this down, turning off my Soft Select. And there we go. I've got one more Control Vertex. It's a little too big. Once again, this is how you can resize everything and move it. From there, we would go to Surface, Bezier Plus, and that, we hit F on our keyboard to focus, we'll go ahead and focus this and make it kind of a plane, or an object. It is a geometry at this point. You can increase or decrease the thickness by going to the Attribute Editor, going to your Bevel Plus, and decreasing or increasing the bevel depth. If you wanted, you could also do the same thing that we did earlier with the cup handle, where you go to Deform, Nonlinear, and Bend. Moving that bend. Remember, if it's not moving the right way, you can actually move that gizmo and spin it. So I'm going to put it there-ish. Let me do that in the other view so I can see it just a little better and not make it curl up on itself. There we go. So that's closer. And I would just decrease the amount of that bend so that it looks more like a petal. Once you've applied a bend, remember to always go to Edit, delete all by type history, and then we want to rotate this around by going to Edit Pivot and moving it down. From there, with the object selected, so we'll go ahead, exit, the pivot is reset, object mode. We would go to Edit, Duplicate Special, and hit the box so that we get the menu option. You put in how many petals you want, and then the amount you want it to spin. Now, the way you actually calculate this is you take 360 degrees and divide it by however many petals you want. So if I wanted 8, it would be 45. And if I wanted 10, it would be 36. I take that number and I delete that number from 360. So I would get 315. So in my Y, since I made it in the top, I would want to put this at about 315. I'm doing that because I want the last petal to rotate, not 360 because it would be on top of it, but whatever their increment is away from 360. And you hit apply, and then all your flowers will wrap evenly. You could also just guesstimate, but if I'd wanted 10 petals, I could go once again to Edit, Duplicate Special, increase this to 10, and then subtract 360 from, 360 from 360, or 36. And running that math, we've got a 4, we've got a 2, we've got a 3. So that is 324. And we'd apply. And once again, it wraps around evenly. This should be a parent-child relationship, so if I clicked on this original one I copied, then I adjust it. So if I thin this one out, it should follow, or I can just select all of them and scale them together. I could also rotate, and because they all have the same pivot, they should rotate around that pivot. So I think you can see it here and here a little better. That when I rotate, they'll all fold around that pivot. I have a lot of clipping, but for this it shouldn't matter as much. So I'm just hitting F in every view to zoom in. I've got my table setting. In an ideal world, I would have taken the time to go ahead and get legs and everything on, but I haven't done that for this demo. And then to make the room around it, I'm going to go ahead and go back to poly modeling and click my plane. Now I want my plane to be large enough, probably not that large, but I do want it to be large enough that I don't want to see the edge of the world when I zoom into my table. You could go ahead and do 2 walls. You could do 1 depending on how you're going to frame the shot. And then when you zoom in, you'll have a room. And that's really all the modeling that goes into this. For lighting, we're going to be doing an Arnold renderer. So you need an Arnold light. It will only work with an Arnold light. So I go lights, and I put in a sky dome, which is going to go all around the object. From there, I would go ahead and put materials in by clicking on Hypershade. I've already put some materials in, but I'll review how to do that. If I want to use an Arnold texture, maybe I'm looking for something that's going to look more realistic, a glass effect, anything complicated like that, I go to AI, and I'm going to look for a surface. Now since, the AI standard surface, I could also just type the name in and I can find it that way. I can adjust them, so if I want it to look rougher, I can increase that. I don't want it to be as shiny. If I want it to look more metallic, I can increase that and make a good texture for my knife, fork, and spoon. Or I could go to presets and pick what they have. So they actually have a glass texture. So I'd click and hit replace. And yes, you can blend them. From that, I would drag this on, and now I should have a glass texture. I can also make textures that have a little bit of a shine or have a picture to them. In the create, we have of Lambert, which is going to be flat, 100% flat. It won't have any reflection. I have a Blinn, which has an adjustable reflection, but isn't really great for metal. And then I have an Yifeng, which will do very well for metal. So for my Blinn, I can adjust the color. I also have this option by clicking that I can select a file. It didn't do much yet, but if I click on file name, I can go ahead and load textures in. So if I wanted this to be a cherry colored table, I would hit open. If I wanted, I could rename my Blinn to maybe table, and then middle mouse drag it on. If you can't see them, that might be because your materials are on 5, which is shaded. If you hit 6, it will appear. From there, if you go back to this hypershade, if I go back to my hypershade, there we go, maybe. There we go. I have nodes, and on this, I can follow the node back and look for the one that says 2D place. This will tell it how many times it repeats on the texture, and you want to look at kind of how blurry it is. So this is pretty blurry, so I'm going to start with a 10 and a 5. Let's see if that did it. So yeah, now my texture, if you notice, is wrapping around a lot better. And that's in this node for 2D place. I could also, if I wanted a texture for the stem, that stems are usually fairly flat. You could have a Blinn again, but we'd say a create Blinn, material Blinn. Turn the shininess down, the specular roll off, and the eccentricity, or eccentricity. And then we turn that to kind of a green stem color. I still feel like this is a little shiny for what it should be, so I'm turning down that reflectivity. And I will physically middle mouse click and drag it to the stem, oopsie, where I'll miss. And if you ever have a situation where dragging it on is extremely difficult, you can also click on the object, right click, and do assign selection to material. I'll do one more video in a minute about rendering, but this is how you would assign the materials and finish up modeling.